All right. So this is the last panel for us. 2 days of this, and this is the last one. And they asked me to do it, and usually I'm more like the Wizard of Oz, kind of in the backgrounds. But I'm excited to actually do this. And when I was asked to put a panel together, my first instinct was to reach out to the Miami Ad School and the One Club. So shout out to them, for really helping put this together. But the idea behind this talk really is to think about the next generation of creatives and how do we empower them and set a path forward. I think this panel in particular has had really diverse experiences and backgrounds. So instead of me doing the introductions, I kind of want to go through and have you guys do my job for me, because think smarter, not harder. But with this frame of the next generation, I do want you guys to talk a little bit about your journey and what are the traditional and really non-traditional routes to make it in the industry. Christian, I'm super fascinated by your background. We've talked about this, so please tell everybody how you're not really a creative, but you are a creative.
It's my Aquarian nature to be a rebel.
Yeah.
So shout out to One Club and to Miami Ad School. I'm a teacher at Miami Ad School and board member at One Club. But I am very much a non-traditionalist. I attended UCLA. I have a degree in economics.
Super creative.
Would not think that you would become a creative from that, but I had a passion for creative, and I started off in film and TV. I lived, from Los Angeles, grew up there, so natural industry to follow. After doing film and TV for a little bit and music, I went to go work for an agency for a year, and I decided absolutely not, never again. I am not doing that, and then moved into consulting. I went to go work for a consulting firm, of all places, where I got to see how companies in the realm that I was working in, sports entertainment, are operationalized. And on what became my final project, getting the Los Angeles Rams, or then St. Louis Rams, back to Los Angeles, I realized I have the tools to go start my own agency, and I did 8 years ago, and realized I've been a creative all along. I've just done it in a different way, and so I feel like both sides of my brain work almost equally, so I can be part creative, part business person, and owning an agency. You have to merge the two. So I'm really lucky to be surrounded by an amazing team of people that are part of my team that really help me lead our work day to day. So
yeah. Shout out Commonwealth.
That is my agency, Commonwealth. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes.
Wearing a couple hats today.
Yeah, of course. Erika?
Hi everyone, so I'm Erika. I'm one of the partners at Lemon Yellow. We're a branding studio. We have offices in Miami, Manchester, and Chicago as well. So yeah, I can kind of relate to what you're talking about in terms of, having these both sides. Because, for me growing up, I didn't necessarily have this vision of I'm going to be a creative. Actually, I was interested in business quite a bit. And I used to go on these little imaginary business trips when I was a kid. But ultimately I am co-running my business now, so I'm bringing that side, and I do feel like I sort of have the split, ability to do the creative and also think about the business, which is really important, for creatives in general. You don't want to sort of be in this bubble, not thinking about, the business side of what you're doing, whether you're a freelancer or you have an agency. But, my business partner and I started Lemon Yellow, not coming from agency experience at all. So it was a very sort of naive endeavor, and we originally wanted to do like a design cafe, which would have been a total disaster because we don't know anything about hospitality. But we did want to, have a cool place to hang out for our friends and, us, and really just kind of be surrounded by beautiful objects and, books and such. I did not go to school for what I'm doing now, so I kind of did things a little bit in reverse, in that I, was mentored by someone as a graphic designer, and then I was not a very good graphic designer. Like, I realized, hey, I know how to use all the tools, but like, I kind of suck, So let me go to school for visual thinking and, you know, fine art, and really just kind of figure out the conceptual aspect of what I'm doing, because I sort of felt like, you know, early on I had mastered all the tools, but I didn't really understand why I was doing what I was doing, or even, you know, the designers that I was looking up to, like Joseph Mueller Brockman, you know, and many others, like the work caliber wasn't really up there, right? So ended up going to school for fine art, and then just really learning the business side of what we do, you know, brute force, because we didn't have any agency experience. So really just came into it quite naively and built the agency, you know, of our dreams as we saw it, just sort of like figuring things out as we went along. So yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Thank you. Roy, please. I know you also have, I mean, this is obviously a clear theme here, but
yeah, I'll try and give you the short version. My story is really complicated. I grew up in the military. I was terrible at school. The only thing I was good at was art. I then joined the military due to the fact that my family were all in the military. And then one of my bosses, after 4 years in the military, if you go in the Royal Air Force, if you stay for 4 years, you basically sign a piece of paper, then you're basically going to stay in the military for the rest of your life. And I went and had that meeting. I expected to sign a piece of paper, and my boss went, I think you should go to art school. Because I kept drawing and painting throughout the 4 years, and I got known for it. So then I went to art school. Had no idea what was going on. I didn't do the usual route because I was terrible at school, and then just loved it and just adopted it. All my teachers were trying to work out what I was good at, and I was really good at painting, and then I got into graphic design, illustration, then got into animation, then VR, set up my own company by accident.
by accident.
Had worked with like Cartoon Network and Disney and all these other things, and I had no idea what I was doing, because I've come from no background of business, the kind of, and then I actually met McCann Will Group. I was driving around England, and this is prior to sat-navs back in the day, and I had no idea where I was going, so I pulled into this drive, and it was McCann Will Group's head office. And I had no idea who they were. And I walked in there to ask for, you know, can you explain to me where this place is? And then I'm looking around, there's TVs and awards everywhere, and I'm going, what is this? This is a weird place. And a guy came downstairs, and we were just getting into the internet. This is like the mid-90s. I am that old. And yeah, and I sat down and had lunch with this guy, and we worked together for 15 years.
Wow.
Wow.
And you're what was it, the youngest? You say.
No, I was, because I learned so many different skill sets, which I think is super important. I just adopted everybody's kind of roles and groups.
Right.
So I was the youngest executive creative director at McCann's. And then I got picked to run the London Olympics in 2008. So that was cool, yeah. And then in 2012, I moved to Australia. And now I've been here in America for 4 years, and I work at MAD. I'm the chief creative officer there. And what we're trying to do there, because we've got such a diverse background in gaming and VR and traditional agency stuff, graphic design, illustration, we've just opened up our own immersive museum. So it's, for me, the place is a really kind of cool place to hang out, because everybody gets to really push their skill sets and learn lots of different things, because everybody, you know, is in the same building, which is not that common these days.
Yeah, it sounds
That's
like
the shortest I could do that. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. It just sounds like you work in a playground.
I think I've lived in 17 different countries to date, so I've moved around a bit. Jesus. But it's I still don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Supposed to be in the Air Force.
All right, Dan.
I'm Dan Onofrishan. I'm a current AGI president of the Miami chapter. So we're American Institute of Graphic Arts. We build bridges for creatives to connect together and, you know, learn from each other and do things of this nature of what we're all doing today. First comes community building, and then, you know, ultimately spreading the word about the world of creativity. And I'm also a freelance creative director. I currently work with clients like Excel Sports Management and some of my return clients from my career back in New York. I was in New York for about 10 years. I worked for ESPN for 5, JP Morgan Chase for 3.5, WPP on the Accenture account, ExxonMobil, CBRE, ProShares, Aetna CVS for about a year. And then after that, I worked for a private consultancy doing pharma tech and all sorts of other fun stuff in the mix, which, you know, the job that I moved here with, and then switched to freelance. So that's my interesting journey right there. And I guess to top it off, I'm from Ukraine. I moved here when I was 15. I'm in my 30s.
Thank you.
Single.
And
I'm just saying.
Yeah, no kids to my awareness.
one thing I kind of want to jump back to, because you guys have now laid out that, we're all kind of like faking it till you make it, and I say that sort of with like I think it's like a badge of honor, because the whole idea behind, for me anyway, behind being a good creative is problem solving, actually, which maybe seems a little not what you would expect. But I think that applies to your actual career growth as well. It's like you just have to figure out whatever the problem is in front of you and make it work and make it beautiful, right? So now that you guys have really laid out your journeys, what are you doing now to sort of help the next phase? I mean, obviously you're literally a professor teaching young minds. So, I mean, what are the things, and what are, Christian, how are you, I guess, exposing your students to different routes or whatever? Because I think there a lot of people think, oh, you go agency, you do this, but clearly it's not that simple.
So I may get fired and taken off my boards for what I'm about to say, but I have a bit of a controversial way of thinking when it comes to traditionality, is that what you just said, by the way, about problem solving, that's first and foremost what I teach my students. Awards are great. I think we should strive for them. But at the end of the day, for me as a benchmark, if I'm not solving a problem for my client, I'm not doing my job. And that can be done beautifully through creative. And that's something that I challenge my students day in and day out. So I teach a class called product creation. And the syllabus says that I should be having my students come up with 20 new products every week. Across 10 weeks, that's a lot of brainstorming, a lot of products that may or may not make it to reality. So what I do differently is that I bring in an actual client from our agency. We set up a brief, and then they are supposed to respond to that brief with products and services specifically tailored for that ask. And their final is week 10, where the client comes in person to the school, and then they pitch their ideas to the client and get praised, critiqued, get feedback. But I do that because, one, they need to build their network, they need to practice pitching, and they really need to think strategically on how you respond to a brief. Because even with my team in the past, where you see a lot of things that are execution heavy versus what is the through line, what is the platform we're really trying to convey here. I think that's really important. Like all the work that we do as an agency, for example, it's all purpose-based. So all things social impact, social responsibility, marketing, that is our niche. We do it in sports, telecom, banking. We like to tell those stories. And so to think strategically about how you kind of advance a global good versus just one-off executions is what I challenge my students to really come together, work as a team, pretend you are the agency that is pitching, and give it your best.
Okay, well, just a quick follow-up, because I was reading about the core tenets at Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. One of the things that stuck out to me, which is has always applied to how I operate and how I think GroupBlack operates. But it's you had a line about compassion that I thought was really, really interesting. How do you view, because I think there's a compassion for your client and like trying to get in their head and empathize with them, but then also in sort of your hiring practices or the kids you teach, how do you apply that and what does that mean to you?
So, is everybody familiar with Brené Brown in the audience? Everybody know who Brené Brown is? So that's my girl. I follow, I've read all her books, seen her specials on HBO and Netflix. But at the core is vulnerability. Yeah. You have to be able to take risks, fail quickly, learn from those mistakes, pick yourself back up, and explore. And that's really what we do day in and day out with empathy and compassion, where for us and for me particularly, so when I was working in consulting, I developed full-blown panic disorder. and realized that panic attacks were not the way of life that I wanted to go about. And one day, flying back to Los Angeles from Mexico City, visiting my dad, I realized that's when I had the epiphany of starting my own company. Like, you know what? There's a life and lifestyle available for you, but you got to choose yourself first. And that's kind of the core of what we do in terms of how we lead at the office, is the whole person. You know, you come as you are. We're one team. No idea is better than the other, really.
Yeah.
And we kind of work to iron sharpen iron, you know, and bring out the best. But it really comes down to ensuring that everyone's mental health is the priority, because our work is subjective.
Right.
You know, we submit it to clients for review, for compliance, for, you know, it's our art at the end of the day. And very rarely do you have a business where you have an art that then gets shopped to somebody and then gets loved or ripped to shreds. You know, I really don't see people doing that to the Mona Lisa often, as much as
It's hard not to take it personally. You know,
it is,
yeah.
and I've had to learn that over the years. I've definitely been ripped apart by clients in the past, but as an agency, as our model of compassion, empathy, and mental health first, that's something we strive to drive.
And a 4-day work week. I don't know if my boss is out there. But,
4-day work week.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's sort of right. The 5th day is like a.
So the 5th day. So we've been doing this for a long time. 4-day work week. Friday's kind of a you do you day. You know, I have my calendar set up that if you try to set up a meeting with me on Friday, there's an auto decline all year. You know, my partner actually recently, for some reason, sent me a meeting invite, and it was on a Friday. He's like, "Why did your Friday calendar go through? Like, you usually don't accept me." It's like, "Oh, that means it fell off in the new year, so I got to reset that." So Friday, if you want to work, that is great. If you want, I don't do meetings on Fridays, just for us, because we're all over the country. Our team is distributed around the country. We work very different hours. I'm like a lot of our work is on the West Coast, so I work like 10-ish. It's like 8 o'clock at night sometimes 9. My senior copywriter is a 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. kind of worker. So we all work very differently. So Friday, like, do whatever you need to do, whether it's business or personal. Like, we work enough hours throughout the week that as long as the deliverables are getting done, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, great, thank you. Erika, we were talking a few weeks ago when we were setting this up, and I remember you telling a really great story about someone you had hired that had like a completely untraditional background. Do you recall?
Oh yeah. So, you know, for us, I think we've taken on like very few designers that actually have a design degree. Like, we've had political science majors, like, you know, even painters, people with business degrees, and all kinds of backgrounds, you know, come through the studio. And of course, there's things that we look for that are not necessarily on the nose. It's not like, you know, you have to have this, you know, great, you know, degree from a school. And, you know, we're looking for just a certain degree of critical thinking and taking ownership. Like, one of the things that we do teach in the studio is just, you know, how do you take ownership of the work? And there has to be a certain degree of selfishness in that. Like, are you designing, you know, also for yourself, or are you detached from the work? And, you know, David Bowie talks from a fine art perspective about not playing to the gallery, right? Like, not creating work that is purely, you know, going to be to please the gallery or the collector. And, you know, for us, it's not that there's an adversarial relationship with the client, because clients are not the enemy. It's more about making sure that our designers are not divorced from the work that they're doing. They're taking ownership of it, and they're understanding. Like, Christian, you were talking about problem solving, you know, Phil, but yeah, we're problem solving, right? But also, you know, what is the idea behind it? What are we trying to say? So understanding that, and how are we saying that in the most effective way possible? Because as a studio, we're known for taking a less is more approach. We're definitely, you know, if you can say something with 5 words, don't use 10, right? And and that goes back to sort of like empathy, because we think about clarity of communication and how we communicate as a studio. Do you want to make it really complicated for people and be, you know, very superfluous and, you know, bombastic about it? Or are you going to be generous and kind in your communication and make things, you know, really beautifully simple for people to be able to understand and grasp. And in order for you to do that, it's actually harder because it's very easy, you know, to put elements on top of elements, you know, as a crutch, or add a lot of color, you know, things that are very decorative or, you know, superfluous, really, because you're not distilling the essence of, you know, what you're doing. So anyway, going back to your point in terms of bringing people on, you know, that necessarily don't have, you know, the typical creative background, but they've actually turned out to be excellent communicators, taken ownership, you know, of what they're doing. Of course, you know, having a great attitude goes a long way in making sure that you're, you know, you're open. The more tight-knit as you are as a team, the chemistry is affected, you know, by the people in the studio. And now, of course, we're in a remote world, so it's, you know, we kind of did things backwards, because during, like, for a while, we were pushing back on the remote thing. We have a really, you know, beautiful studio, and it's, now that we've gone fully remote, people are coming in because they want to be, they want to be there, because they're missing us, I think, also a little bit of the human connection as well, which is important. So, but they have the freedom and I think the peace of mind knowing that, hey, if I don't need to come in today, I don't have to go through this, you know, bad commute or whatever. So yeah, hope that answered that. But.
Yeah, absolutely. Roy, I think you had mentioned that you guys had set up an academy at Democrat.
Yeah, probably next year. Yeah. It's interesting living all over the place, and trying to find local talent is really hard here.
Yep.
You know, if you're good, there's this desire to go to New York and LA, and London's the same. So what we're trying to do here is actually create a network. It's one of the reasons we've opened up a museum, is to bring people in and make you realize that advertising can be art, it can be a creative outlet as well as working for clients. So, but the education system over here, I'm fairly new to it. It's interesting. It's insanely expensive, but it's also I think if you create a academy where your biggest thing that you can bring to it is enthusiasm and energy. I don't care where you went to school. I don't care what color skin you have. I don't care whether you can afford it. None of that matters. It's whether you've got the energy, and if you've worked in this industry for a long time, you can spot it. You can spot it really quickly. Yeah. So for us, it's trying to generate, because we do a lot of VR and a lot of animation and high-tech stuff, and it's really hard to find people just to do that in America anyway. But it's then going, I want to meet the 14, 15-year-old kid who has a passion for it, but might not necessarily have the way of getting into that industry, because it's a really hard industry to get into, especially without going to university. And a quick thing, one of my best animators, I hired him a year ago from Chicago. This is a guy that wasn't very good at school, didn't go to university, got his girlfriend pregnant, and decided he wanted to become an animator, and spent 2 years on YouTube learning how to become an animator. And he applied to so many different places and nobody looked at him, because they just looked at his documentation as, well, you've not been to university. Which, when I met him, his portfolio was so far advanced to everybody else that had come out of uni for 3 or 4 years.
I believe it.
And I personally think that's going to become just more common. These days, with all the tools that kids have access to, kids can create their own adverts in their bedrooms. They can create their own cartoon shows in their bedrooms. They can create anything now. So it's allowing them to really understand that you don't really need to go down the path that everybody used to go down. You can kind of break the rules. And as a creative person, I think we're supposed to be breaking the rules. We're supposed to, that's the whole point. You get to get given a brief, and then you get to break the rules and play and have fun with it. So that's why we're trying to create this academy, so then we can bring people in and educate them on the stuff that you actually need to work in this industry, as opposed to having a certificate at the end of 3 years saying that you've done something. So that's something that we're really passionate about, and I think it's, for me, I just think that's going to be the future for so many kids.
Well, you sort of get to create your own future as a company too, because to me there's some parallels with sports, and how, especially in Europe, and how the professional sports teams, the football teams, they have their own academies and they really get these kids in young and teach them, and then they go in and become pros and stuff. So it kind of reminds me of that.
It's a great analogy, yeah. And it's the thing, isn't it? We look for kids in certain sectors. Sports, a great example, is you're trying to find those kids before they're like get even to 10,
right?
And then you train them up, and then they become superstars.
Right. Yeah.
You touched on a good point with, with passion, and I think that's so important, because when you're passionate and driven, no matter what your background is, whatever, like you're gonna go after that, wholeheartedly and full force. And like we've seen that, we have somebody in the studio who has a printmaking background, and it's actually like printmaking is hard. It's not like, it's sort of a tedious, if you do it well, like the technique, it's process driven. And so she is somebody who's like extremely like, process driven, and will do things very thoroughly, meticulously, and also is constantly learning and teaching herself things, and not depending on other people to learn and technology. So it's and it goes both ways, because when you have somebody like that who's really passionate and interested and driven, like you're also going to butt heads, because they're going to have something to say and they're going to be passionate about it, and sometimes you might disagree, or you might have arguments or whatever, and it all comes on the flip side. And I think it's fine. It's a great benefit of having somebody who's vested and interested and driven in what they're doing. So yeah
It's finding people with real curiosity, right? I think that's such a driver behind creativity. You don't want to get sort of complacent with your ideas, and you have to kind of push the envelope. And I actually think this ties to something else I want to talk about that Roy, you touched on around technology and some of the spaces you guys are playing in, which when I started my career, or even before that in school, I was always like really intimidated by the software, like how am I going to learn all these things? It seems so unimaginable. I mean, and now it's so much easier, right? Like you said, you can learn anything on YouTube, and Photoshop and After Effects and all these things that I've been able to learn. But what I'm curious is, obviously YouTube is a good example, but like, what are these other tools, right? The biggest topic at Possible right now is AI. Every single panel is talking about it, so I guess we should too, right? But it's this idea that, like, for creatives, is it an existential threat to us, or is it something you can harness? And because I think the thing that sort of excites me about it is that it lowers the bar to entry. And there's a spectrum of AI. There's the Gen AI stuff that is on one side of things, but then there's like the tools that allow you to work faster and whatnot. Dan, is this something that's brought up a lot within your organization, within AIGA?
Yeah, there's some concerns here and there, but I think it's more paramount in the industry in terms of like thinking of AI as a tool that speeds up your process, and using it more as like a concepting tool for rough draft, like version 00, before you even start to like get your own hands in there. Especially in the world of brand marketing and advertising, I think that a lot of time and overhead when it comes to business decision making can be saved on retouching and compositing.
Yeah.
I mean, the generative AI, you can literally tell it enhance. Like how all the movies in the 90s and 2000s were like enhance. You can literally tell it that and it'll enhance. Yeah. So I think that's pretty interesting from that standpoint. At AIGA, I mean, for creatives in general, I think it's more of a tool. I don't think it will ever replace humans, because humans feel. AI does not feel. It does not understand contextual, like the things that you ask it to do contextually, it like doesn't get it. Like you need to go into all this wild goose chase of explaining exactly what you're looking for, and it takes about 5 to 10 prompts to get to a decent result that's still like a rough draft version 00. So I think we're probably at least 5 or 6 years out before it becomes an actual air quotes threat.
Yeah, I agree, and I think also there's like a philosophical thing where, at the heart of it, I think people just want to hear stories from people, you know, and even if AI creates something beautiful or whatever, knowing that it came from that sort of takes away the magic.
It's pretty good at bullshitting stuff.
Yeah, it is, right? But, you know.
Isn't there some controversy right now with Drake and Kendrick Lamar? Somebody at the studio was talking about it today, and I'm not super well versed on it, but they were saying that they found out the lyrics were AI, and all of a sudden it was like, you know. So there's a question of authorship and the stories, you know, when you think about, so a friend in London yesterday sent me something, and I think it's important to put this in the context of, okay, yeah, maybe AI isn't there yet, but, you know, doesn't mean it won't get there. But they sent me something that was Star Wars Mid-Journey created, and it was so obviously a fake, even though it was kind of beautiful in its execution, but clearly not George Lucas. And this brought up an interesting discussion in the studio when we were talking about, you know, the panel and just bigger kind of questions, you know, as far as when you think about like the Campbell soup, you know, and who cared about the Campbell soup before Warhol made it what it was, you know. Now you're tying this to an individual, and there's a connection there, a human connection there with a background and things that we connect with and are meaningful to us that legitimize that, right? So yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting, like, what do we have to hold on to, right? Our who we are as people, and like emotion and connecting with people emotionally. And we have a client, for example, a firm that is very big on innovation, and you know, the founder has actually been doing these videos where he explains IP law, you know, on social media but he's a very charismatic, you know, person, and you know, even though they're so tech forward, like they're bringing the human component, you know, forward as well, which I think is really smart, because we need to be bringing the human aspect and the things that, you know, connect us as people, you know, more to the forefront now as brands, you know, as people, etc. Because AI cannot do that, you know. And ultimately, also, I feel like there's a sort of, you know, battle for against the generic and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I think it also saves you time. I think we use it all the time, and it's. Yeah, our job is just to tell stories. That's what we do. So if you can save more time in production, or even as Dan was saying, it allows you to research a lot faster, allows you to get the concept out much faster, which then in theory gives you more time to tell a better story, a deeper story, without having to traditionally spend days crafting illustrations and things. So for us, it's just, you know, it's the new thing that's on the block, but we said the same thing with print, and same thing with radio, same thing with the television, same thing with the internet. Now it's AI. They're all still around. You know, they're just tools. You know, but I think, you know, if it can elevate your storytelling capabilities, which normally comes down to having more time to do so, then for us, I can see it getting better. Clearly, it gets better by the day. We play with it all the time, but it's just, for us, it's more exciting. I don't see it as a threat at all. I think the fact that anybody out here can create anything, I think is awesome. You know, it really levels that field. You still have to know what you're doing with it. You still have to have some creative element, otherwise it's just a toy. But I'm a huge fan, and the bigger and better these things get, the more time we have to play around with stuff. And I think, you know, that's, from a creative point of view, I think that's just the best place to actually be.
Yeah, I think, you know, so much of what we do, because for an outsider who's not necessarily creative, I think you just kind of see the finished product.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of I don't know if the word's, you know, glamorizing maybe of like the creative the actual process of creating work can be very at times mundane or tedious and repetitive and stuff. So the things that excite me most are probably like you're saying. It's just like, how do I speed these portions of it up? Because I just really want to spend more time on creating, right? Because what we do can be very, very technical, and so like, you know, spending hours like fixing audio or like you know, little things like that. That's honestly what excites me the most. Do you have any, or any of you have any specific examples of AI that you're using right now, or new technologies?
So at the school, we hosted a class, a pitch day, where they could only use Midjourney.
Midjourney, yeah.
Could only do, like, could not, everything had to be done through AI. And it was really interesting for me to watch because, I've now been doing this for a year, first time teaching ever, and we're in the communications business. I personally love to pitch. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do when I go pitch new business or pitch an idea. I'm very expressive, if you haven't noticed yet. So that to me is really important. And seeing my students pitch something that they didn't particularly come up with. I mean, they gave the prompts, but they weren't like in the weeds of it. I could see a little bit of their detachment and how they sold the concept through.
Because they didn't have that ownership.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus when they did come up with something, like I could see two different personalities. Like there's this one student of mine, Emily, who when they did the AI presentation, she was kind of monotone and she delivered a good pitch. But when then she came up for an actual pitch for an actual client of ours, like this is a whole brand new person. Like where was this person during that other presentation? Because there was that ownership. Like I did this, I made this creation, and I'm really passionate about it, and I get to show you and talk to you about why it's important.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point because, there's the question of like experience in the creation process, and, it's true that it's not necessarily always a glamorous, it's never really a glamorous situation, when you're creating, and it's not also this like stroke of lightning or, getting inspiration in these obvious ways. It's like you can come from, anywhere, any place, anybody. But, this detachment that you're talking about from the process, like because you were not involved in, every aspect of the curation process. And that's not to romanticize either. I think that the question of efficiency, it's solving that is great because I was thinking about how, during this age of enlightenment, like, for example, the aristocracy who happened to have a lot of time on their hands, had time to think and innovate and create and, do all these wonderful things that, the working class unfortunately couldn't. They were working all the time, right? So now we have the luxury of being able to either automate certain things or become more efficient in our processes without detaching ourselves from it. And that can enable us to become better thinkers and also level up as designers and creatives because it's leveling the playing field, but it also, I think, is forcing us to level up. So yeah.
Another area that I kind of wanted to jump into was when I look back at my career, we're all talking about how we've had sort of non-traditional paths. For most of my career, I've been the most senior creative in the company, and that's just because I only spent like a year in an agency, and after that I joined a tech company, a startup, and was there to build a studio of creatives and kind of figure it out as I went along, and then I joined GroupBlack before it even became a company, and was there to do that. And one of the things one of the sort of what if moments of my career is looking back is like, what if I had stayed in agencies? Because you'd be surrounded by more creatives and you'd have more opportunity for creative mentorship, which I think is important. And I've had to seek it from other people, CMOs, CEOs, just completely, not what we would traditionally call a creative. So what role has mentorship played for you and this is an open question, but both from, you mentoring the next group, but also like who was that person for you or those people that really gave you the guidance to get to where you are now?
For me, I don't think that I would say that I have had formal mentors. I've had people along the way. On one of my first stops early in my career journey, there was this woman who I'm sure many people in this room may know the name Linda Yaccarino. At the time was the head of sales and marketing for Turner Broadcasting, Turner Sports, where I worked. And when the boss calls you into the office, you go, and she's having her blueberry, this is in New York, Walked into her office, having her blueberry oatmeal and her leopard print top and these huge like Manolo Blahnik boots. She was like, just like, have a seat. She's like, I just want to remind you, so as long as you work here, you remember that not all money is good money. And that's something that stuck with me because I've had to be in that decision-making role over the last 8 years and realize that it's okay to be selective on how we take clients and how we approach our business model. It's unique, it's niche, but it allows us to do what we love to do best. And that was as a direct result from me having that little conversation with Linda in my very formative early careers. And this was still is a very intimidating figure in the business. She's now the CEO of now X, formerly known as Twitter. So she's had some pretty big roles, but having that conversation with her early allowed me to feel, you know what, I can take some risks here and I can really carve my own path as I move along. But mentoring others has been really important to me because I have been really blessed in my career to have had doors opened by Black women. And so me paying it forward to other creatives of color has been really, really important for me, especially now that I'm teaching, to make sure that I open doors that were opened so generously and kindly for me.
I love that.
For us, we have become, I think, more patient, with like young designers, and I have to give my business partner credit because he's actually incredibly patient with, just taking the time to sit down and answer questions and be available. And I had a mentor once who was probably she was this kind of a big assistant to a CEO, and she was the busiest person on earth, and she never once said I'm too busy, and she was obviously the busiest person alive. And I've learned that when you say I'm too busy, it's just kind of a shitty thing to say and do. But we also, in mentoring, like, there's an honesty and a transparency that goes in the studio. Like, we will have heated arguments about stuff, that is design related and the semantics of something, or, the meaning, or even just, keeping ourselves in check in terms of like, okay, what's the idea behind this, and are you executing it, true to that idea, or are you just, taking a shortcut today or whatever. But and they see all aspects of that, and I think that, that's also important because you sort of exist in a bubble when you're in school. I mean, if you have critiques, like, that's great, but I remember us going to do a portfolio review at a university, and the first thing that, the two reviewers were told was, don't be too hard on the kids. And I found that offensive, I was like, it's, you're expecting us to hold back and not be honest and critical, right? Like, that wasn't this recent, by the way, critique. This is another scenario. But, it's just having this honesty and making sure that as you're mentoring, you're being kind and gracious, but also not bullshitting either,
right.
And being too afraid to hurt feelings and not telling it how it is. So I remember once we had somebody come, to the studio for mentoring, and we very kind of nicely, I think he, in school, was sort of like looked at as like the hot shot, and we came and very just kindly sort of ripped the portfolio apart, and we were like, pointing out a lot of things that we saw that were an issue with it, and it wasn't in a way to sort of dishearten them or anything like that. 10 years later, I get an email from this guy, and he was now working at Saatchi & Saatchi, and he really wanted to thank us for that day that, he's like, I completely, did a 180, and I really appreciate, the time that, you guys spent and what you told me. Even though at the time he's like, it kind of was, not what I wanted to hear. He's like, I'm at Saatchi & Saatchi now, and then he's like, are you guys hiring? Like, so it was really sweet. But yeah, that's our role in that.
I'm looking at you now.
Yeah. Well, I have one more question that I'd love for each of you to jump in. It's a little broad, but looking ahead, what do you envision for the future of creativity and innovation? So, good luck with that one.
Let's consult the crystal ball. Like,
yeah. What do you think is the next thing, I guess? I mean,
if I had to guess, because neither of us have the answers, right? But I will say
I've got
that.
all the answers.
Sorry?
I have all the answers.
Dan's
You
got
have
the
all the
answers.
answers? Dan, I'll let you take over then. You wanna talk about it?
Which one of the answers do you want?
Which one? Yeah.
The most
but
relevant.
No, but I did run into something recently that was a fairly unique thing where you can ultimately feed a URL into an AI engine, and it will develop and deploy and implement and monitor campaigns, all from one single prompt and a URL. You give it, say, Nike.com and say, we're doing a campaign for X, Y, and Z. It will do the best X, Y, and Z it can based on anything else see on the internet. That's slightly scary, but also fun. I mean, that means we can spend more time, doing the cool stuff and like less implementing and tracking the numbers and doing the pixels and all that other fun stuff. That's not so much fun.
Right.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see just an explosion of creativity because everyone's got access to all these tools now.
Yeah.
You still know, I think you still need to know the basics. There's still fundamental things, which is at MAD, that's what we spend most of our time teaching is the fundamental stuff. Understand there are certain rules to what we do, and if you understand those, then you can break them. But yeah, I'm just waiting to see like young people just adopting and making their own TV shows, I think there's no excuse now. If you have the creative energy and the output and access to these things, I mean, it's just going to be amazing to see how the creative marketplace should, in theory, boom. Because I think most of the stuff out there, like Hollywood, I feel very stale. The music industry, I feel, is quite stale. It's very traditional, right? And it's kind of, how many times can Hollywood remake the same movie? It's and I think, so the idea of young people coming up and actually having access to these things where they don't actually need to go and speak to a big company, they can make their own films with their friends in their bedrooms. For me, that's super exciting. It should, in theory, I'm waiting for this explosion of just ideas and energy, and I think the industry kind of needs it because I think it's comfortable, and I think every now and then you need to kind of shake things up a little bit, and I think now giving access to all of these tools to literally anybody, is for me the most exciting part of what we do, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the results are.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that because that's exactly how I feel. You said it much better than I would have, but yeah.
Well, that's all. Yeah, it's exciting to see that we have these things now. Like even when we got started, like just putting a website up was like a very costly and complicated endeavor. And now anyone can create their own website and anyone can create their own content. And that's great. And I think with that at the same time, like there's this sort of initial period where in the inception of the adoption of this technology, you sort of all these things happen and then it sort of like balances out. Or thinking back to the 90s and like Photoshop coming about, and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, I can design now on Photoshop, which is not really a design tool. And then all this terrible design happening, and a lot of with the computer back in the day, like tons of fonts everywhere, and it was just like this crazy chaotic kind of visual clutter, as Massimo Vignelli would say. But then with Flash, sort of the same thing happened, and then early 2000s, people were sort of like, okay, maybe I don't need to have, a Flash intro for the sake of it, or, 20 different, typefaces on, one piece. But so now I think, there's this period of exploration and sort of like trial and error and kind of figuring out what do I do with this stuff. Like, I can do so much with it, and it's exciting that you have the experimentation aspect, because if you want to be experimental and do things, from your living or your bedroom or whatever, you can, and you can put it out there. But yeah, I think with that also should come a consciousness and a responsibility in terms of like, what am I trying to say? Is this really the best way for me to say that, using this tool, or am I just putting noise out just because I have all this technology that is enabling me to do whatever I want? And then, it's sort of like everybody wanted to become an influencer because you have a social media account.
That's like finding the intention behind
That's
everything
pretty
you do.
good. That's
Yeah.
pretty fun.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you so much again for taking the time to come here. And thanks for everyone for listening.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us.